The bridge of the TSS Warhawk was eerily silent. Dozens of officers sat at their stations, screens pulsing with streams of tactical data. Captain Elias Voss stood at the center, arms crossed, his gaze locked onto the massive holographic display of the Zenith fleet hovering in Terran space. The transmission had arrived exactly 13 minutes ago. The Zenith hegemony's demand was clear: surrender and submit to Imperial rule or face annihilation. A standard message, one they had likely sent to countless civilizations before. Elias had no intention of replying. A young lieutenant turned in his seat. "Captain, their flagship is hailing us again." "Orders?" Elias exhaled slowly. "Let them speak." The bridge darkened as the holographic display flickered, resolving into the image of a towering alien. Admiral Kreshta, Zenith-born, with ink-black eyes and an exoskeletal frame glistening under dim lighting. He spoke in heavily accented Galactic standard, his tone brimming with arrogance. "Humans, you stand at the threshold of your only chance for survival. The Zenith hegemony offers you order, security, and purpose. Reject it, and you will be wiped from existence." Elias tilted his head, studying the alien's posture, the way his mandibles twitched slightly, the way his elongated fingers drummed against his gilded breastplate. He wasn't here to negotiate. He expected fear. He expected submission. Elias let the silence stretch just long enough for discomfort to settle in. Then he spoke. "Your fleet is now classified as hostile. You have 60 seconds to pray to whatever gods you believe in." The Admiral's mandibles flared in shock. "You dare!" The transmission cut. "Lieutenant Vora," Elias said calmly, "commence." A ripple passed through the Warhawk's hull as the first hyperaccelerated kinetic lances fired from their spinal mounts. The bridge's display flared to life, showing streaks of molten light carving through the void, closing the vast distance between the two fleets in seconds. The first impact was silent, space carried no sound, but the visual was unmistakable. The Zenith battleship Ralkarth, a hulking beast of alloy and energy shielding, took a direct hit amidships. There was a brief shimmer as its shields tried to compensate, then failed. A moment later, the warship ruptured. On-screen, chaos unfolded. The Zenith Armada, confident in their superiority just moments ago, struggled to react. Their formation broke as human warships surged forward, each attack precise, methodical, and merciless. Elias remained still, watching the battle unfold like a game of strategy already won. The Warhawk's AI-assisted targeting systems had predicted every possible maneuver the Zenith could attempt. Their responses were too slow. "Hostile forces down to 63% strength," Vora reported. "Their dreadnought is attempting to reposition." Elias tapped a command into his ARM console. "Override. Target their propulsion core." The Warhawk's secondary batteries unleashed a synchronized barrage. The Zenith dreadnought's engines detonated, sending the massive ship into a slow, helpless spin. Within moments, a trio of Terran corvettes swarmed it like wolves around a wounded beast, tearing it apart with relentless firepower. An incoming transmission request flashed red. Elias allowed it. This time, Admiral Kreshta was different. Blood leaked from a gash along his chitinous scalp, his breath shallow. The grand arrogance from before had crumbled into disbelief. This is impossible." His voice was barely above a whisper. Elias stepped forward. "No. This is humanity." Kreshta trembled. "We are the Zenith. We have ruled for millennia. You are your end," Elias interrupted coldly. A final impact struck the Zenith flagship. The transmission cut. The vessel broke apart, its wreckage scattering like embers in the void. "All enemy ships eliminated," Vora confirmed. "No survivors." Elias exhaled, watching the last remnants of the Zenith fleet dissolve into debris fields. This hadn't been a battle. This had been execution. He turned to his crew, his voice even. "Prepare for the next phase." The bridge was silent for only a moment. Then, a single word echoed. "Aye, Captain." The Zenith homeworld burned on every screen aboard the TSS Warhawk. A once proud capital, now reduced to a fractured, crumbling husk. The orbital stations had been the first to fall, shattered remains drifting lifelessly in space. The defensive fleets followed, their wreckage scattered across the void. Now, the surface itself suffered. Captain Elias Voss stood motionless, eyes fixed on the devastation. Fires raged unchecked. Skyscrapers crumbled. The once glistening spires of zenith dominance had become tombstones. Their species had ruled for millennia. Now they would cease to exist. A voice cut through the silence. Captain, we're receiving an urgent transmission. From their ruling council. Elias barely reacted. Put it through. The holodisplay flickered to life. A zenith archminister, his ornate robes stained with soot and blood, appeared. His mandibles trembled, his once piercing black eyes now dull with fear. Behind him, the grand chamber of the Zenith High Council lay in ruins. Other officials huddled behind him, shaken, broken, defeated. We surrender. His voice cracked. We acknowledge your supremacy. We accept your rule. Elias tilted his head. Rule? He let the word hang. You misunderstand. We are not here to rule. We are here to end you. Shock flickered across the archminister's face. But you have won. There is no need for. There is every need. Elias's tone remained cold, unwavering. Your empire has spent centuries conquering, enslaving, exterminating. You never allowed weakness. No mercy for the lesser species, no second chances. The archminister's breathing quickened. We can change. The hegemony can be reforged. Elias took a slow step forward, his face unreadable. Would you have given us that chance? The archminister faltered. He knew the answer. Elias's silence pressed into him like an iron weight. The Zenith had ruled with absolute brutality, until they met a species that excelled in it. The archminister's mandibles twitched. Please! End transmission. The screen snapped to black. Elias turned to his crew. Begin. The final phase of the extermination doctrine unfolded in chilling precision. Human warships descended into the atmosphere, delivering annihilation. Orbital bombardments shattered entire cities. Bioweapons, specially engineered to target Zenith DNA, spread across the remaining population centers. They had no countermeasures. No chance to adapt. No time to resist. Elias stood firm, watching it all unfold. He knew his orders. He knew why this had to happen. Beside him, Lieutenant Vora hesitated. Sir, there are non-combatants on the surface. Elias's gaze didn't waver. We know. Vora's throat tightened. And? Elias's voice remained calm. And it changes nothing. The officer hesitated. Then he nodded. Orders were orders. From the planet below, the final Zenith broadcasts flickered across intercepted channels. Cries of panic. Desperate calls for help. A few begged for mercy. Others cursed humanity with their final breath. Elias did not look away. It had been necessary. When the last fires burned out and the final signals faded into static, Zenith Prime was no more. Humanity had done what no species in the galaxy had ever dared. They had not fought a war. They had ended one. The war should have ended with Zenith Prime's destruction. That was the logic of it, the unspoken rule of conquest. A civilization falls, its leaders die, its worlds burn, and the victors take what remains. That was how the Zenith hegemony had built its empire. That was how they had crushed 1,000 species beneath their rule. But humanity did not conquer. They erased. The death of Zenith Prime was not an isolated event. The Terran fleets did not halt, did not establish governance, did not offer terms. They moved from system to system with cold precision, ensuring not a single Zenith colony survived. TSS Warhawk drifted in orbit over Valkara, one of the few remaining strongholds of the dying empire. Captain Elias Voss stood at the command station, arms crossed, watching the tactical display. Below, the Zenith forces had gathered what was left of their military. Hundreds of warships, planetary defense grids, fortress cities designed to withstand sieges for decades. This was their last stand. Vora's voice broke the quiet. Enemy fleet at full defensive posture. No retreat signatures detected. Elias wasn't surprised. There was nowhere left to run. A communications officer looked up. Sir, incoming transmission. High Warlord Zeldar. Elias glanced at the name. He had expected this call. Put him through. The holographic display shifted, revealing Zeldar in full battle regalia. The Zenith Warlord was old, even by his species' standards. His exoskeletal armor was adorned with battle scars, his piercing violet eyes burning with fury. I know what you are, human. His voice was steady, unreadable. You don't seek dominion. You don't even seek power. You're here for something far worse. Elias met his gaze, unblinking. Understanding at last. Zeldar exhaled, a sharp click of his mandibles. This is not war. This is annihilation. Elias said nothing. We have faced extinction before, Voss. Empires rise and fall. But never like this. Zeldar's grip on his ceremonial staff tightened. You could have broken us and forced us into servitude. You could have left us weakened. But you refused to allow that. You kill not just our soldiers, but our history. Our culture. Our name. The silence between them stretched. Zelda's voice dropped lower. Why? Elias leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. Because your kind would do the same. The Zenith Warlord's mandibles twitched. Perhaps. But we never feared you. We do now. A faint, humorless smile touched Elias's lips. Good. Zeldar exhaled slowly, then straightened. Very well, human. If this is how it ends, let it end in fire. The transmission cut. Elias turned to his crew. Engage. The Terran fleet moved with clinical efficiency. Coordinated strikes, precise and devastating. The Zenith warships fought with unmatched ferocity, but they were outmaneuvered, outgunned, outclassed. One by one they fell. Surface defenses fired desperately as drop pods rained from orbit. Terran strike teams landed in the heart of Zenith's strongholds, eliminating resistance with brutal efficiency. There were no attempts at occupation. Only extermination. The battle lasted 7 hours. By the end, Valkara no longer existed. Elias stood at the viewport, watching the last flames die out. Vora swallowed hard. Sir, there are no more major Zenith worlds left. Elias nodded. He had known that. There were still remnants, scattered fleets, isolated colonies, but the Empire as it once was had ceased to be. A deep breath. A slow exhale. Vora hesitated. What now? Elias turned, his expression unreadable. We find the rest. The last Zenith world fell in silence. No desperate final stand. No transmissions begging for mercy. No curses spat into the void. Just the quiet hum of the TSS Warhawk drifting above a dead planet. Captain Elias Voss stood at the central viewport, watching the ashen remains of what had once been the Zenith stronghold of Kaler 6. Firestorms still raged across its surface, smoke coiling into the atmosphere. A civilization that had ruled the stars for millennia was no more. He felt nothing. Final strike teams are returning, Lieutenant Vora reported. His voice held none of the hesitation from before. He had stopped questioning. He understood now. Elias gave a single nod. Losses? Minimal. A pause. Zenith casualties, total. Not a single survivor. Just like the others. The bridge was quiet. No one celebrated. There was nothing to celebrate. The Zenith hegemony was gone. A notification blinked on Elias's command console. An incoming transmission. Not from the ruins below, from the Terran High Command. Patch it through, he ordered. The holo display flickered, revealing Admiral Kiara Roth, her expression unreadable. She studied him for a moment before speaking. It's done, then. Elias nodded once. Roth exhaled. Humanity has never done this before, Captain. Never wiped an entire species from existence. Elias met her gaze, unflinching. We didn't start this war. No, Roth admitted. But we ended it in a way that will never be forgotten. She leaned forward slightly. There will be consequences. Elias knew that. The galaxy had watched in silence as humanity carried out the extermination order. Some species had feared the zenith, but others had seen them as a necessary power, a force that kept weaker civilizations in line. Now that force was gone. And in its place stood something far worse. Us. Ross studied him carefully. You understand what we've become, don't you? Elias did. Humanity had always fought wars like cornered animals, defiant, resilient, unbreakable. But this was different. This wasn't a battle for survival. This had been a demonstration. The message was clear: cross humanity, and you cease to exist. Roth's voice softened. Do you regret it? Elias didn't answer right away. He turned back to the viewport, watching Kaler Six's remains drift into nothingness. Then, finally, no. Roth nodded, as if she had expected that. Return to Sol, Captain? There are discussions to be had. The transmission cut. Elias exhaled slowly, then turned to his crew. Set course for Earth. Vora worked the controls, the coordinates locking in. The Warhawk turned, leaving the ruins behind. The zenith were gone. But the fear of humanity had just begun.